Network Africa. South Sudan's main opposition leader, Riek Machar, calls for a 6-month extension to deadline of November 12 for forming a unity government. The death toll rises to 42 in Cameroon's landslide. And should the Boeing 737 MAX planes fly again, relatives of March's Ethiopian plane crash victims say no. And welcome to the program. I am Amarachi Ubani. The peace process in South Sudan might be hitting a brick wall as main opposition leader Riek Machar says he will not be joining the unity government by the November 12 deadline. He's now calling for a 6-month extension to the deadline, confirming the country's peace process will not adhere to its original timeline. Spokesperson for the former rebel leader Riek Machar said the original time would give room for resolving issues, adding that the extension would only be worthwhile if the government released funds it had agreed to spending on implementing the peace deal. South Sudan split away from Sudan in 2011 after decades of war. It then plunged into its own conflict at the end of 2013 after Riek Machar was made after the president, Salva Kiir, sacked Riek Machar as his vice president. Meanwhile, Mozambique's main opposition party, Renamo, is appealing the result of the October 15 general election, calling on the country's top court to annul incumbent President Felipe Nyusi's victory. President Nyusi and his ruling Frelimo party won big in the election, which is hoped to calm tensions in Mozambique. Instead, the contested result has stoked divisions as opposition parties cry foul. This latest election could set the seal on a fragile peace pact designed to put a definitive end to 4 decades of violence between Frelimo and Renamo. The two fought a 16-year civil war that ended in a truce in 1992, but have clashed sporadically since then. Here in Africa, well, staying in Africa, but in Central Africa, the authorities in Cameroon are asking people to vacate the west of the country after a massive landslide reported on Monday. The death toll from that disaster has also risen to 42. Following heavy rains, the land gave way, crushing houses below. A rescue operation in Bafoussam town had to be suspended on Tuesday because of the continued downpour. Authorities say among the 42 people who died, 26 were children and 4 pregnant women. 8 people have also been rescued from the landslide. Regional Governor Fonka Awa Augustin said on Tuesday that people had built homes on unsafe ground despite government warnings. 104 migrants on board the French charity rescue ship Ocean Viking are heaving a sigh of relief as they've been allowed to disembark after 12 days at sea. They've now docked at the Sicilian port of Pozzallo. Italy's Interior Ministry allowed the ship to dock in Italy as France and Germany agreed to take in 70 of the migrants. Amongst those aboard were 2 pregnant women and 41 minors under the age of 18. French charities Médecins Sans Frontières and SOS Méditerranée, which operate the ship, had issued an appeal on Monday asking Europe to designate a safe port for the migrants who picked up off the Libyan coast on October 18th.
It's completely inhumane to treat people in this manner that have been rescued at sea. They've all come from Libya, where they tell us stories again and again of the abuse and the violence, the sexual violence, the being treated as property and sold as slaves. These stories we hear over and over again, and the situation does not change. We need a comprehensive search and rescue capacity from other EU member states in the Mediterranean Sea. We need a coordinated disembarkation plan to have a concrete solution each time. and we need to bring them to port quickly. To keep them out at sea this long, it's completely inhumane and it's disgusting what's happening. There are some resolutions that are going on, but nothing concrete is in place. And so to treat people like this, it's not appropriate what's happening here.
Relatives of the victims of Ethiopian plane crash say they do not believe the 737 MAX can fly safely, dismissing Boeing company's chief executive Dennis Muilenburg's apology. The grieving families made the comments after Muilenburg faced intense grilling by U.S. lawmakers at a hearing over what the company knew about its MCA's stall prevention system linked to two deadly crashes and about delays in turning over internal 2016 messages that described erratic behavior of the software in the simulator. The hearing, the highest profile congressional scrutiny of commercial aviation safety in years, heaps pressure on the newly rejigged Boeing senior management team fighting to repair trust with airline customers and passengers shaken by an 8-month safety ban on its 737 MAX following the crashes, which killed 346 people.
I'm not a technical expertise on all this, and I believe that at some point the regulators will allow it to fly. But I believe that the plane should not be flying again.
I don't care for Mr. Muilenburg's remorse. I don't know what he feels inside. I get my solace from my friends and my family, not from the people who caused the death of my sister and the other 346 people.
If the public wants to trust them, if they want the public to trust this new MCAS fix, which we still don't know if it's there because the plane is inherently unstable or to just make its handling be smooth. We still don't know it, and in fact the Joint Authorities Technical Review Committee couldn't even determine that. We don't know what it is. They should disclose their MCAS fix, which they're holding private and only given to FAA and regulators. They should disclose it to the public.
Agriculture is a major booster for many economies in Africa, hence the annual observation of Africa Day of Food and Nutrition Security every October 30. Today is set aside to bring public attention to food security. Regarding this, the African Union heads of states gathered in July 2003 in Maputo, Mozambique, to proclaim and sign the Declaration on the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Programme. The declaration obliged the governments to find solutions of starvation and malnutrition-related problems in their countries. But despite this declaration, still asking the question how far Africa has come in eradicating famine and drought. And here's a man with some answers. Let's bring in Interim Director of One Campaign Africa, Mr. Edwin Ikwora. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Ikwora, well, it would be safe to ask what the significance of marking Africa Day of Food and Nutrition Security is, but really, has Africa been impacted by a focus on food security?
Of course, the thing is, there has been some focus. Since 2014, there was a renewed commitment of the Maputo Declaration in 2003. So in 2014, there was another commitment in Malabo, and it's a recognition of the fact that food security or food and nutrition security enhances labor productivity, which enhances economic growth. But even right now, it's getting more interesting because with food security issues, it's also associated with security as in terms of real security, as per people dying from insecurity because of conflict. So when people are not feeding well, people are hungry. You already know the parlance that says a hungry man is an angry man. So the significance, the link between hunger and conflict is also also correlated, and that's why it is really having such an impact. But have we fed? What have we done so far? What the African leaders have done so far is still, it's still not enough. It still looks like we are not really getting we're not putting the power behind that, the impact that food security could have.
I'm also wondering if you're also looking at the correlation between food security and climate change. And as you have observed, you may have observed, there's been a number of floods, especially in some African countries. In Central Africa, there have been floods in the past 1 week or so. Cameroon, we just read in the news today, still grieving from the landslide that happened on Monday, and that's due to heavy rainfall. Even here in Nigeria, you have states that are experiencing floods beyond control, and people should be worried about how much food we're able to gather this year.
Yes, people should be worried. So climate is playing a major part across Africa. It's not just in Cameroon, it's not just in Nigeria. The role of climate change and food security is not just a correlation, it's actually direct. As you know, across Africa, we are still very heavily dependent on rain-fed agriculture. And so when any change in weather affects productivity, affects the output, insects, or what you call them, there are diseases, drought. Again, when there is no rain, it's also another part of that chain. So we are very dependent on weather. We're very dependent on climate, and so any change in climate affects the food production level. We're actually hoping that with this level of rainfall and flooding, people should brace up for lower harvest, which could increase the food prices. And we're already seeing that Africa is already a net importer of food. We're spending over $35 billion, importing food to Africa every year. With the weather conditions, it's going to worsen. So the scarce resources that we don't have already is going to just increase the situation. So yeah, there's a lot of reason to worry in terms of the current climate trend or weather trends that we're seeing.
Now, recently, the NGOs in Zambia have been appealing for at least $3.5 million in donations just to avert food insecurity, which could affect millions of people. That story is pretty much the same across Africa, still appealing for aid, international aid, to help regions that are worse off, affected by drought and farming and so on. What really can African countries do by themselves to end poverty, apart from relying on international aid?
The first is very clear. You need to invest in your food systems. And since Maputo and since Malabo, there's an agreement to do 10% of the production of our budget to agriculture. Nigeria just submitted its budget proposal, and now it's 1.3% of that is going to agriculture. So we're trying to see across the continent, we talk about this, have we done it? So sometimes we have to ask ourselves, are we really serious about ending the food crisis? We are using foreign reserves, foreign earnings. We are importing food into the continent. If we do not take care of this, if we don't invest in the food systems, if we don't invest in the land, in cultivation, if we don't invest in technology that will improve productivity, if we don't invest in input and seeds, if we don't invest in the young people, because the farmers are also aging, if we don't invest in increasing access for young people into the agricultural sector, it's almost like we're waiting for a crisis. So the appeal from Zambia, for instance, is just one of those. Drought is worsening it, floods are worsening it, and we're still thinking, why do we need to appeal for the investments to come in? It has, for us to sustain, the key crisis here is that the food production is not growing as much as the population is expanding. So food production per capita is getting less and less every year in Africa. So we are expanding population, the production is still remaining stagnant or even going down. And this is where the big crisis is. So if we don't do something drastic, if we don't invest in that sector to improve productivity, to increase our output, I'm telling you, it's just disaster that we're just waiting to see.
Yeah, I can't even begin to think what next year would look like. Thank you again, Mr. Edwin Ikora, for speaking with us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead on the program. We're also asking the question, could Kenyan researchers develop East Africa's first anti-venom? It's looking likely. Stay with us.